Have you ever wished that somebody would give you a step-by-step plan to get your money in order? I know that as a doctor, you may have found yourself scrimping and scraping and happy to have glazed donuts and black coffee in some conference room when you got to the hospital in the morning. And I also know that when you started to make money, you may have totally grown into your income and gone beyond your limits. Today's guest is going to give us that step-by-step plan. Keep listening.
Welcome to the Doctor's Mentor Show. If you believe that medicine is an industry and not a profession, if you enjoy submitting complex reimbursement claims, or you would do another residency just for fun, be advised, you're about to be offended. You should probably leave now.
All this talk about mentoring doctors is ridiculous. I thought doctors learned to do everything better than everyone else the first year of medical school. At least that's the way they act.
If you love assisting patients with vitality breakthroughs, if the right to practice medicine without interference is important, and you want expert tips for practice freedom and profits to support your epic life, welcome aboard and prepare to be blown away. The Doctor's Mentor Show starts now. Here's your host, Dr. Lori Barr.
Today, I'm so happy to bring to you Belinda Rosenblum. She is a CPA and a wealth expert, and she's the president of OwnYourMoney.com. And that is an educational company and wealth building company that helps individuals take control of their money and have a better relationship with money, both the mental relationship and the physical relationship. Welcome, Belinda.
Thank you so much for having me, Lori. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Today's topic. Live.
Now, Belinda and I have an interesting path that we've traveled together. I ran into her work as part of a telesummit that she was participating in. And she, as part of that telesummit, had a download. It was a financial spreadsheet and a couple of other tools that you could use. And they were so concise and so easy, not a lot of fluff. It was just the bare bones, exactly what I needed at the time to get a handle on what I was working on. And this was back in 2016. What was more impressive was after I started working with her material, she called me. She called me and asked me exactly what was going on with my money. And then she asked me to make a commitment to myself to take the next step and let her mentor me in increasing my net worth. And I cannot tell you how exciting it's been to be able to follow her advice, understand better some old ideas that were no longer serving me that she helped me release, help me celebrate my successes as I increased my net worth by several $100,000 over the past 2 years when we've been working together, and really help me grow into being a better mentor for everybody else in medicine about something that they don't necessarily want to talk about, finances. So, Belinda, tell me, you've worked with a lot of different professionals, different walks of life. What is the biggest mistake you see people making with regard to debt that they may have?
You know, I think that there's something really to be said for those of us who are in leadership positions, right? And really looking to do big things in the world, to recognize the need to take control of our money. What happens so much of the time is that we view money as a necessary evil, right? Like it's like an obstacle to achieving what we want, but it can really be the tool. And it's like we're working way too hard to be this stressed about money all the time. And what I find with doctors in particular and health professionals is that you're so busy working all day, sometimes overnight, right? And then you get home, it's like the last thing that you want to do. So it just gets pushed to the side and very consistently, it just gets pushed, and then you're on this like rinse and repeat cycle. And it's a lot like health though. It's like if you want to be healthy, we have to take care and do proactive measures, right? Preventative measures to take care of our health. Well, our wealth is a lot the same way. And there's some simple steps that we can do to really learn the skills, because I think what happens is that we're just never taught. And all of a sudden, doctors will come out of school or within a few years of graduating and you're making good money, but you never learned how to be a good steward of that money. So then all of a sudden you have this money, you have this debt, and you never really had a good strategy for paying off the debt or for really doing the best things with all that money that you're making. And so what happens is that we just end up stressed because we feel like, oh my gosh, I'm making all this. And then people do their taxes and they're like, I don't understand. Like, where did it all go? It says I made this much money, but I don't have that much money in my bank account. I barely have anything to show for this last year of work. So what's really important to recognize is what you may be procrastinating on or just not wanting to pay attention to, and then really starting to look for the skills that you need to be able to move forward. And the fact that you are making good money is more incentive, not less incentive. What happens sometimes is that people think, oh, it doesn't matter, right? I'm making enough, I can just cover it. But to me, it's just putting more zeros on the problem. Okay, but also on the benefits of working out a solution. Right. And I think that's why you can confidently say, like, we've raised your net worth by a few $100,000 because you're making the money, but it was about paying more attention to how you were spending it and just being more intentional about it. Right. And really being clear on goals you had in the future and building out this business because you're not solely in your day job. Like, you are a leader and you are such an incredible entrepreneur. And so we wanted to be able to help that happen too. But when we're in the stress of money, we actually self-sabotage ourselves to be more successful with it, A, but also B, to be the thought leader that we really can be. And so once you can get that handled, it can really open things up for you.
I just want to make sure everybody's aware of the current statistics on medical education debt. The American Academy of Medical Colleges came out with their 2017 numbers, and the median amount of student loan debt for medical students is $192,000 for 2017. And 75% of medical students actually graduate with student loan debt. And just as a comparison of private medical education versus public medical education, the typical total cost for attending a medical school in the U.S., if it's a public school right now, is $243,902. And if you attend a private school, it's $322,767.
Wow.
So you're talking about the kind of money people would invest in a home. You're leaving medical school, and the last thing you want to think about is having a home-sized debt on your shoulders when you're trying to go into your residency and master your craft. So
it's a lot of weight.
It is.
You know what I mean? Like, I'll hear from people that they'll either usually compare it to this huge weight or burden on their shoulders, or they'll think of it like a noose around their neck. Like, it can be strangling when you're sitting with that much debt. And I mean, you showed like the average was $192,000, right? Like, that's a lot. That is a lot of zeros on it, right? And so part of what happens though is that we can get really resigned to that. Like, oh, I guess I'm just kind of like I have my mortgage. I guess I'm going to have that debt forever. And what I would rather see people do is to recognize, yes, I had to get that. Well, there's two things. One is, how do you minimize the debt going into it as much as you can, right? Whether it's from scholarships or aid or something, or being able to work while you're in school. But then above and beyond that, so there's kind of the before, but for many of your listeners that might be looking at the after, is then to be like, how do I set up a clear plan to pay off that number instead of feeling like I'm going to die with student loan debt from my medical school, because people have told me that.
Right. Let's look at the before piece for just a minute here. I know, for example, in the real estate investment sector, one of the goals is to get to where you're the bank. You're financing real estate deals. How do you feel about physicians setting themselves up to be the bank for other physicians? For example, let's take it on a family scale. A lot of doctors, their kids go into medicine too. What has been your experience with family-owned lending vehicles as opposed to federal student loans or a debt to another agency? Why not at least keep the interest in your own family?
a couple of things. One is that I want to make sure that we're not sacrificing our own lives now and retirement to pay for our children. Like, we can't get financial aid for our retirement. And I think sometimes what happens is that we give to our children for their school so that they don't have loans, but then we look back and we don't have enough saved for our own retirement. And so it's one thing that we can be their bank or we can help pay for things, but I want to make sure that it's not at the sacrifice of you being able to be on track and have sufficient retirement. The other thing is that any money that you are loaning to your family, you have to be willing to have a very long time horizon for that, or not have an expectation that you're going to get it back. But I think what happens is that you don't set your children up for success if you expect them to aggressively pay that off as soon as they graduate. Right? Because there's residency, it takes a few years until you're really earning good money to then be able to pay that off. So I think that that's something important to be able to see. I don't see a lot of them being the lender, particularly when it's that much money. I'll see usually where they're taking on the loans themselves. That's important to notice where you're doing that, because I actually think that there is some value in the children having a role in paying for their schooling. It's kind of like when you have some skin in the game. You pay attention to something differently. And so I don't want parents to take the burden of all of those loans on themselves and then try and save their children from it, but then burden themselves so much that they end up sacrificing what's really the best financial move for them.
On financing education for children, as soon as I knew I was pregnant, we started saving. And it was just immediate take off the top from my paycheck that I never saw, so I never missed it. It was painless savings because of that. And we set it up in such a way that it would grow over time and then be usable. And that worked for us. We covered, the whole educational expense for my son's college.
With money that you consciously saved. I think that's the difference,
well,
right?
Consciously, but unconsciously, because once I set it up, it was set it up and forget, which works well for me, as you know.
That's good. That works well for so many people, particularly doctors, because you have so much, I call it like responsibility fatigue, right? You've heard of like decision fatigue, right? Where you're just making decisions and you're literally making like life-saving decisions on a regular basis. And so by the time you get home, you're just tired. Like your brain is tired. You don't want to be making a lot of decisions. So the more that we can automate, the better, generally, right? As long as we have enough money in there. So I'm all in favor of that. The point that I was making is it wasn't like you had to pull a couple $100,000 out of your savings account. You know what I mean? You knew that you were setting money aside. And I was seeing some numbers recently that are basically like, if you put $1,000 away every year, by the time your child gets to college, you'll have almost, you'll have enough for their college education. With $1,000 a year, like that's not very much, and you just have to make sure it's invested. If you think of the rule of 72, if you've ever heard of that in terms of how compounding interest works, but essentially if you have your money invested aggressively because you don't need the money for a while, if it's at a 10% rate, then every 7.2 years, the money doubles. Right. And then reversed, if it's at a 7.2% rate on average, every 10 years, it doubles. But if you can start to look at how quickly the money becomes from $1,000, you're adding $2,000, that's doubling $4,000, how quickly it can really add up and be sufficient to help fund the school. So I would rather see something proactive like that than an afterthought when they're 18 and have you take on more debt when you might still be paying your own debt. And I was working with a woman named Christine, and she went back to school later on. She wasn't a doctor, but she went back to school later on. And so she had student loan debt and she's in her 50s, right? And so it's about, okay, how do we aggressively pay that off? Because I don't want you to be trying to retire and still be trying to fund debt, because then we'll need that much more money for you to have in retirement to pay for this old debt.
So how did you do that? How did you get her to aggressively pay that off at
that
age?
Okay. Yeah. So I teach money in with a system that has 4 simple steps. I think what happens is that money feels very complicated so much of the time. And so I really want to simplify it. So people are like, wait, I can do this, right? I'm smart and successful in the rest of my life. I can do money. Like, let me show you how. So here are the 4 steps. And we actually have an upcoming workshop called Enjoy Extra Cash Every Month. And I think, part of it is generating the breathing room for ourselves and really that extra cash to be able to enjoy the money that we make.
Wait, I have to interrupt you here.
Okay, yeah.
When you said enjoy extra cash every month, I know what popped into my head as the first thing I would do for that. And I'm just wondering, just putting this out there to my listeners, just go ahead and send me a little voice message of what popped into your head when you heard Belinda say that. And then we'll compare notes. I think it'll be really interesting.
I love it.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. Back to the 4 steps.
Yeah, that's okay. What I love about what you just said is it gives you a why. It gives you like, well, what would you want to do with that extra cash? Like, what is your vision of that? And a lot of times it has, something that like travel that you want to do or free time you want to be able to have. And other times it's paying down debt, building the savings that has you feel more comfortable. But it's really knowing what that why is, like knowing why you want the extra cash will make taking any steps to get there that much easier, right? And that much like more willing, a willing participant in this process. So I love it. Yes. Let me know how that goes. I would love to hear. It's very fun. And in the workshop, so we did it as a 3-video series. And in the first video, there's a download and I go over these 4 steps in more detail, but I'll give you a high level now. And then I set that up for all of your listeners at ownyourmoney.com/doctor.
Yay.
We have an assessment that you get right away because our workshop opens up on April 19th. And so people can sign up now. And then people will get an assessment where they can start to look at what are the money skills that they're missing so that they know where to target their learning. Because what happens is that it just feels like there's this big expansive topic of money and, well, where do I start? What do I need to learn? So this will really help you pinpoint the specific areas that you want to learn more about. And so it helps take this like vast topic into something that you can actually handle and handle easily. So 4 steps I promised you. Okay. So first one is mindset and earning. And you'll notice that these skills really build on each other. So I don't start with paying off debt because the first thing I need to do is really get your head on straight when it comes to money. What happens much of the time is that we have these patterns that you may notice based on beliefs that you formed when you were younger, and then you create these patterns over time that often are showing you that your initial beliefs about money were right. Now, what I will tell you is that those beliefs are generally non-supportive. Okay, because what happens is we're drawing a conclusion based on something that happened, but it's not usually something that's a positive memory of money. Usually the ones that lock in are negative and they're very visceral. So like the ones that will be like money is pain, or I'm thinking of Justin, and he basically, long story short, he came home, he had been saving his money in his piggy bank. He was a paper boy, came home one day and his mom had taken all the money out of his piggy bank. And he drew a conclusion right there that it wasn't safe to save, that he couldn't trust women with money, right? Goodness. And like very strong, clear decisions that he made at age 7. And then he came to me at age 37, 30 years later, and was still living through that belief. He couldn't understand why he was constantly fighting with any girlfriend he ever had about money, right? Where his mom and him had weirdness between them. And no matter how much money he made in his business, he never had anything in savings. What we did was we really reframed that story. And that's what we look to do in mindset, is really step into being the owner of your money, right? The company is called ownyourmoney.com. Step into being the owner of your money and really rewrite that story and your beliefs to something much more positive. A lot of times too, it can be a series of events. So I'm thinking of a woman, Sarah, and she watched her single mom really struggle with money. Her dad had passed away when she was young, and her mom was trying to raise 3 kids and a business and just keep it all together. But there was a lot of fear and scarcity, and they just didn't have a lot of money growing up. And so now she grew up 30 years later, and she's still living into the scarcity that she watched her mother have. And so it was about reframing her story to see how much courage her mom really had to not feel like she had to go jump into a marriage or that she had to go jump into a job. She was pursuing what she wanted to in her business and really providing them what they needed when they needed it, so that instead of feeling shame for what happened and continuing this pattern of fear, she could see the courage and see how she has taken on her mom's courage. And there was a few tears, and really getting how freeing that new story could be for her in her relationship with money and her relationship with her mom. Second piece of that first step, by the way, is earning. And so once we have your head on straight, you can really look at what are you earning. And even for doctors, you can start to look at whether it's your main job, whether it's your whole practice, how do we grow your practice? And that's why I love the fact that you do podcasting and you really help mentor doctors to be able to, and healthcare professionals really, to be the thought leader, right? To build their practice, to build their platform, and build your earning capabilities, right? And not just be in this potential, but really being the earning power that's possible for you. So that's earning, mindset and earning. The second piece is tracking and spending. And so this is one where I have a little bit of a, I guess, counterintuitive way of doing it, because first, yes, I want you to track where your money is actually going. And I have a step, it's part 2 of this workshop, this free workshop I'm doing, where I have you highlight your unconscious spending. Because if we can start to highlight your unconscious spending, then we can start to stop what are the money leaks, where essentially your mental accounting is different than what's actually happening. And so you think you should have $600 more in your bank account, say, because you think you're only spending $600 on groceries, but you're really spending $1,200 on groceries a month. Yeah, I see that kind of thing all the time.
Just a side note, for all you out there who help your patients deal with any kind of improper relationship with food or alcohol or anything, doesn't this sound familiar? Aren't we keeping a money diary? I mean, just like you would a food diary. If you were inappropriately eating food, you'd want to know what you were unconsciously eating, right? Same thing here. I love it. Go ahead.
Totally. Yeah. And it's such a great analogy, because I think we can appreciate it when it comes to food. So we also need to then appreciate it when it comes to our money, because it can often highlight, and if you might need to wrap your head around it when it comes to food first, like really buy into why that's so effective. And then, I mean, my husband has lost over 100 pounds. I'm not sure you and I have ever really talked about that, but he's lost a ton of weight. And one of the key things was him starting to track what he was putting in his mouth, because without that consciousness, he would like order a pizza and a sandwich and French fries and all this food. He'd think it would last him a week. And then before he knew it, it would be gone that night. And there was no consciousness around what he was actually ingesting. The same thing goes similar goes for our money, because what happens is we don't have a lot of consciousness to what we're bringing in or where we're spending it. So where it's going. And so tracking really helps you to do that. And then this template that I give you in this workshop is really helpful, which is a lot like the one that you did actually way back almost 2 years ago now, that was so eye-opening for you. That template can be really effective to help you highlight what we need to tame, what we need to change. And I am a proponent, by the way, of making sure that you're still able to spend on the things you value. It's not about sacrificing your lifestyle. It's about being more conscious. Like, I would rather have you spend the money where you want it, but maybe not overspend on insurance or cable or phone. I mean, every time I call my phone company, we call about once a quarter, I always seem to get a lower rate. Like somehow there's always a new plan that gets me a lower rate, but they weren't going to call me. I needed to call them. And it's been anywhere from $30 to $80 when I've called per month. And then my cable, like I can't tell you how many people I've looked at their spending, and I have them call their cable company, and I'm like, wait a second, you're just spending way too much. They probably couldn't even find all those channels on their remote control. It was that kind of thing. And so I just had them lower those. So it's things where we just have you take one-time actions, right size everything, and then really set it up so that we can automate the rest, but pay attention to usually only about 3 to 5 money leaks, I call them. And so if we can focus on those instead of feeling you have to stress out over a tight budget, I don't think that really works. I think that probably, especially as doctors, you're just too busy. But if you had a handful of items that you knew you need to keep an eye on every month, that you could do.
And
right?
that's been so
for you
true.
And for your partner too.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, in doing this, one of the big eye openers for me was when I had the template and I was looking at credit cards, for example, and different ways that I would use credit cards. If there was any outstanding debt, you asked me to rate how I felt about that. Like, was I okay with it, or did it really make me feel yucky inside? That kind of thing. And I'd never done that before. So that was really key. And then the other thing was on the big picture template where you were talking about making sure you honor your values. There's never been once when we've worked together that you haven't allowed me, family is important to me. God is important to me. And, the way I allot money for contributions or allot money to support my extended family, you honored that. You showed me ways I could do that and take care of all these other things too. And it was really amazing. So I really want to highlight that because I do think that's very unique about what you bring to the table.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I'm glad that you mentioned that because I think that a lot of times people have this misconception that if they start to pay attention to their money, it means they're going to have to sacrifice their lifestyle. And I find that it's important to recognize it's not an either or. It can be the both that you were just talking about so that you recognize, how do I still do what I care about, but then not, let some of these other things go that I don't care about. So like maybe we don't need to buy water. There's so many convenience items that we spend money on, like water and coffee. And like, I'd much rather have you buy a really nice coffee machine for your house, put it in your mug, take it with you to work every day instead of feeling like you need to take 10 or 15 minutes out every day and make a stop. It's that kind of just a shift that says, these are the things I value. This is where I want to spend my money. And I want to make sure I'm saving so that I have more choices and freedom as I progress. And so what's interesting about that second step of tracking and spending is that it also then includes a bit of planning so that we're starting to plan for items that don't happen every month, but that happen over an annual basis. Because I think that's usually where people get themselves into credit card debt and into trouble because they're not thinking about that. And so through this tracking module, you'll be amazed at how much money we can free up. Like on the low end, it's usually $200 to $500 a month. It's usually more like $1,000 to $2,000 or more that you're then able to free up. So then that takes us to step 3, which is our credit and debt. And so it's really about having the best credit score that you can. So I give you just a solid understanding of how is it calculated and what are the things you can do. But then also when it comes to debt, it's doing that debt prioritization sheet that you talked about, right? Which is listing out all the debt in one place with the interest rates, with your minimum payments. And then we prioritize it based on a few things. One of the important things is the emotional connection that you have with that debt. Because I remember I worked with one woman and she had this lingering debt from a divorce. And it was like every month she just had this angst about money in general, about debt in general because of this one little debt. I said, we're just going to pay that off. And I swear when she wrote that check, and we actually, of course, had her then call the person, it was an attorney, and she was like, what if I just solve this now instead of being on this 5-year payment plan? What can you do for me? And though I think they took off 20% right off the top, she wrote a check. We had amassed the money because we had been doing that. We did the step 2 first, and then she paid it off. And it was like she was a different woman afterwards because we don't realize the weight and the stress that we're holding, especially when we have this debt that's not working for us. Once we prioritize it, then we can really be proactive and very intentional and even strategic about paying off that debt. And so instead of feeling like, okay, I'm going to have this $100,000 plus of debt forever, we really look at what do we prioritize? How do we get that done? How do we pay the minimum on everything except for the one that we're targeting first? And then we're strategic about getting that one paid off, and then we get the next one paid off. And then one by one, you get to enjoy what happens when you watch your debt go down, and you can start to see how, as you pay it down, we can start to redirect more money into savings for yourself.
I want to take just a minute here and highlight one point about calling and asking to renegotiate the terms.
Great, let's do it.
Sometimes as doctors, we have no problem being the alpha power authority as we recommend things to our patients. Yet when we turn around and maybe look at a corporate entity, especially if it's outside of the healthcare sector, we may feel powerless. Now, another thing I love about Belinda is since she's from the Northeast, she definitely, and her corporate background. Now, how many years were you in corporate?
15.
15 years in corporate.
I'm older than I look. Yeah, 15 years in corporate, 11 years doing this. Yeah.
So, she has no problem coaching you into the right conversation where you may not realize that you're on equal, if not better footing than who you're talking to on the other end of the line, even if it is with regard to debt or renegotiating service terms. So, and that's both for your personal and your practice. It's amazing.
I love it. And I think what you just touched on is really partly why when you take ownership of your money, so I say you own your money and you own your life, because then what happens is you realize you can step into being this leader in your life instead of feeling like you can't do what you want to do. And it's interesting. I mean, my book is called Self-Worth to Net Worth, right? And so it's about recognizing how do you really build your own value and your own self-worth so that then when you want to move forward, it it's all very grounded in your own value. It's grounded in your own power. And I don't have people talk in this entitled way. It's really in an empowered way. And so you can do it freely. It's totally in line with who you are and your values. And you're just standing up for yourself, right? In a way that respects them and also helps you maintain your position. And we don't always win, but you'd be amazed. If you don't ask, the answer is always no, right?
Right.
So it's important that we have you feel like you're doing as much as you can to really be the best provider you can for you and your family. So, so that's step 3, right? So we had mindset and earning, tracking and spending, credit and debt. And the fourth one is saving and investing. Again, it's intentional in order because once you have your head on straight, you're making the money that you want to make, you're tracking it, right? We're freeing up the cash in what you're making. Then we're getting the debt paid off aggressively. And then we actually have money for saving and investing. And I believe that it is helpful to have some always going to saving and investing and not waiting until all the debt is gone, particularly like not waiting until your mortgage is gone or even until all your student loan debt is gone. Like I want to see you contributing to a 401k or a 403b or a Roth IRA before you cross the income limits, right? Because there are income limits. So then you may max out kind of a thing when it comes to the Roth, particularly with doctor salaries. So anyway, so the point here in saving and investing is that I want to also now, with all that freed up cash, kickstart your saving and investing and really get you moving, get you understanding the lay of the land, the like ABCs, which sometimes can feel very complicated. I want you to learn how to work with a financial advisor if that's the right bet. So I'm more of a financial coach or like an expert that can help guide you through what has seemed so complicated, because I think most people, even if they're earning good money, struggle to pay their bills. And so this 4-step system that I just walked you through really allows people to maximize what they're doing with their money now, and then also maximize what they're doing with it in retirement. So I am not going to invest the money personally. Like I'm not a financial advisor. I originally was a CPA, so I still have my CPA license, but I don't practice taxes or any of that anymore. I worked with big corporations, helping them close their books and be more efficient, actually, is what I used to do in my previous role. And so I want to see everybody implement this 4-step system to get control and really work from, this is what I teach in the 3rd video of the extra cash every month workshop, is how to move from stressed to secure. And that really there's a continuum that I want to see you move through, where you go from stressed to aware to in control to confident, and then really to feeling secure. Like you know you're on the right track. And I will tell you that particularly for those that make good money, like doctors often do, it's that much more stressful when you feel like you're not doing the best things with it. The good news, though, is that there's really so much that you can do without it taking a lot of time, without it taking a lot of energy, but just getting a little bit of guidance along the way.
I just have to give a shout out to my mother here, Lee Barr. Both of my parents grew up dirt poor in rural North Alabama. My mother was the oldest of all her siblings. She, like, for example, in the 7th grade, she wanted to go to a new private school that opened in her community, Mars Hill Bible School. And in order to do that, she actually raised her own tuition money by picking cotton. I mean, it's the South, you know, and it's before the 1950s. So she picked cotton and put her way through school, and she continued to put her way through school for the rest of her education. And she has a PhD in psychology. So that was many years.
Wow.
And I just have to say that when she took me aside when I was 19 years old and first starting medical school and encouraged me to A, not amass a lot of debt, B, start saving money as soon as any was coming in, really made a difference because of that compound interest. And, you know, the big takeaway I want you to hear is, as you're thinking about what you've already invested in your education, even if you've got a lot of student debt, you already know the value of investing in yourself over time and educating yourself in areas that you don't have the right education in. This is another example of taking the time, putting a few resources toward investing in your own education over time. I mentor a lot of people, and I still have mentors, and this is a good example why. And anytime I'm thinking I'm making the wrong move, I see my mother in that cotton field, picking that cotton, putting herself through school in the 7th grade. And it changed her life. It gave her the chance to get out of North Alabama, to be a world-renowned speech pathologist. And that was it. That was because she took ownership of her money at a very young age.
And notice the conclusions that you drew. So you found that, kind of like the Sarah story I told, right? You saw what happened, or, what was happening in her life, and how she chose to have courage and to own her money and to really say, wait a second, I can be in control here. What am I going to do to make it happen so that I don't have debt? I got some scholarships to school, and I worked during school, and I was on the swim team in college. That was important that I didn't graduate with debt. Right. And that was part of what my dad encouraged me to do as well. So I love that. And no matter what kind of background you grew up in, there is still time to do something now. It's amazing actually how many of my clients are in their 50s, even 60s. Somebody who was just turned 70, our academy. So we have a program called the Moneymakers Academy. We have people from age 29 to 73. Wow. And I would say the majority of them are like in their 50s. If I were to pick one, like 30s, 40s, 40s, 50s, 50s, 60s. I think the majority of our people are in their 50s. And there's so many success stories. I just interviewed 8 of our students actually in the last 2 weeks. And so many of our success stories can happen at that point because you're making good money, right? And to get a little bit of guidance can go so far. Like people are literally like 10xing their investment. And our academy is very reasonable. It's like $49, it's very reasonable. And we even have an upgrade that people can do. And this is an interesting one I'll touch on for a sec, where you have an accountability coach every week. And I think that one of the biggest things that you want to look to when you're looking to put something like this in for money is to recognize where you're going to get the accountability from. Because life is going to happen. You're going to get busy. So we either need to make sure that you're on the same page with your partner and you guys are having regular, what I call money dates, right? Where you're essentially like sitting down every week and looking at your money together, or at least every month. And if it's not going to come from your partner, then we need it to come from somewhere, because otherwise life will happen, you'll get busy, and you just won't stick to it. And I think that's partly why you were so successful, because I was your accountability partner, essentially, right. As your coach. And I do a handful of private clients. I'm very selective in who I work with at this point now, because so many people do come through our programs. But there's really so much potential for you. And so for everybody listening, I would say let's start you off easy with just taking the quiz and starting with the free workshop and just starting to try on you developing a new set of skills around money, and getting that it doesn't have to be hard and complicated or a lot of math or something that's going to take a lot of time. It's absolutely something that you can do. We encourage you to spend 30 minutes a week or so on our trainings, and it's all downloadable. People put it on their phones, they listen to it whenever and wherever they can. But really getting that this small amount of time can have such a big impact on your quality of life.
Your next step.
So now let's talk about your next steps. So if you have resonated with anything that Belinda and I have been discussing in this episode, your next step, number 1, is to think about what you would do if you did have extra cash, because you're going to have it. Number 2, you're going to go to www.ownyourmoney.com/doctor and enter your information so you can see exactly how to do that and go deeper with Belinda on those 4 steps to build your wealth. Belinda, any last advice?
I think if everybody just take a deep breath. I think so much of the time we get a little anxious, or like a little angst when it comes to just thinking about money and thinking about all of the self-judgment we put on ourselves about what we haven't done over time. And just use this as an opportunity to let yourself off the hook and say, wait a second, Belinda's right. Or Belinda and Lori were right? I never learned this. I've had this big should on myself because I'm smart. I'm a doctor. I should know what I'm doing. But the reality is that we don't take a class generally on personal finance. I wish we did, but we don't really. And I was an accounting major at a top school, and I never did. Right. And I share my story in the workshop where I was a top accounting professional and had a mess of paperwork at home that I hadn't taken care of because my dad actually had a stroke when I was 21 years old and I became family CFO. So, we often take on a lot of responsibility that we didn't ask for and that we don't have the time to deal with. And so I want to help you be able to get better with your money so we can free you from the stress and instead have you feel like this is another area where you can also be smart and successful. And I totally believe in you, and I totally believe it can happen. Thanks, Lori.
Thank you, Belinda Rosenblum, author of Self-Worth to Net Worth, 12 Keys to Creating Wealth Inside and Out, and owner of ownyourmoney.com. Don't forget, go to ownyourmoney.com/doctor and take that quiz.
Are you stopping at a hospital? Hello? Don't you know that hospitals are one of the sickest places on the planet? Don't touch anything in there and get out as fast as you can.